Welcome back to Carpo's channel, and I hope everyone's having a phenomenal day. Wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing, and whoever you may be, as always. Today, I would like to ask a question. First off, this video is not intended to be alarmist or conspiratorial or premonitory or anything like that. Premonitory? Is that a word? Anyhow, I'm not here to try to burden you with the possible scenarios for an apocalypse, even though that word completely does no justice, because apocalypse means something that is seen, something, an unveiling of something. Here I go, I'm already getting philosophical on this shit. It's a very simple concept. I want to give you a scenario where you wake up one morning to some sort of a rumbling or any kind of event, perhaps something you haven't even considered, no one could consider. The one I always picture is waking up in the early morning, walking outside and seeing the aurora borealis, which technically I guess it would be the aurora equatoris, I don't know. The point being that an aurora this far south, where I live on the 45th parallel, has been known to happen before, only during major solar storms. So if I were to walk outdoors and I saw that, if I saw major aurora in the sky where I live, I would know we're in for some crap. In fact, in that very second, I would grab my wallet, I would be heading down to Walmart or anywhere that was open at that time of night, and I would load up with all the groceries, canned goods, and everything I possibly could. And so you might ask why? Well, because a major solar storm is something that is expected to happen to us eventually. But that's not what this is about either. There are so many possibilities of things that could happen. Living in the Pacific Northwest, we are overdue, well overdue, for a regular earthquake every few hundred years that happens here, a major quake because of the subduction zone we live in. And so, for the sake of this video, I wanted to talk about what types of communication a person should have available to them in the event of a disaster. So you go outside, you want to know what's going on. All your friends are standing in the street, something happened. You go in to turn on your phone or your TV, whatever it might be, it's not working. Or maybe your phone works and it can't connect to the internet because the power's out and your modem's not working. So you try to connect to the cell towers and you get a little bit of information, then they run out of their backup power. Cell towers are very unreliable in the long term, as we saw with, I believe, Katrina, where 70% of the cell towers went down for up to weeks and people were left to try to scramble and communicate. So in front of me here, I have a few different methods to communicate. The first one that I do not have present, which is not even a member of my emergency supplies, is a satellite phone. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, a solar storm would just knock satellites out anyway, and we probably wouldn't be able to use them. But B, even if satellite phones do work, and they're amazing for emergencies, you have to pay up the yin-yang to be able to afford to have them. They are getting cheaper. You can get packages that are, in the hundreds of dollars with a certain amount of data or time you can use. So if you want to buy one for an emergency, they are available and you can get one for the low hundreds of dollars range, but it's also something that you will never use and you have to make sure that it's something you really want to buy. So if you're an avid backpacker, hiker, it might be something worth carrying. That's up to you. What I have here are three different methods of communication. And this right here is a PACE CB, side talk, basically a CB. It's a 1023B, basically a home CB system, and allows you to listen in on what's going on. You can go on the air. You've got your little standard CB truckers, breaker 19, the whole thing. I don't know anything about CBs as far as using them. I know people who used them in the past. When I was growing up in the 80s, there were a lot of people who used CBs still. There were a lot of these especially certain types of people, kind of the at-home, hide away from society people who would sit there and they'd talk with truckers on the CBs, have big antennas. But that's also, while it's a phenomenal way to have access to local communication, that would only allow you to hear for so far. It's very limited. It would allow you to hear what truckers or other people are saying in the local area, depending on the antenna system you had set up. But it's a very short band. I think it's like 4 watts. It's not very powerful. But if you move up from the CB, you get the ham radios. This is the Baofeng UV5R. It's probably the most sold ham radio in the world, I'm sure. Everyone has one if they're into ham radios. It's a very cheap unit.
Frequency mode.
It's got all the different modes on it, all the different settings you could possibly want.
Frequency
It's
mode.
even a built-in flashlight, of course. And rechargeable battery pack with the charging station. These last forever. The battery is phenomenal. It has a detachable antenna where you could theoretically hook up any size antenna. In an emergency situation, you'll figure out how to make shit work. Let me just put it that way. And I have 2 of these, and when I bought them, it was probably 8 years ago maybe, in my emergency storage phase. They're probably, I think I paid 50. They're probably like, I heard 25 from somebody now. They are dirt cheap and totally worth having. This has all the same channels as this, which is what I believe the FMRS video. The FMRS radio system is basically your standard Motorola 1 through 14 channel, right? I think it has 14 channels. And these are the same old radios used where it says 15 to 20 mile range. The truth is, anyone who uses these knows that's complete bullshit. You get about 10% of that. You might get, if it says 15 to 20, you get maybe a 1.5 to 2 mile range. But even less, extremely less in the city. You'd be lucky to get 1 city block with some of these family radios, as they call them. Unless you're out in the desert or from the mountains to the valley on a long straight path without interference. And that's just not very common. These are much more powerful. I'm not sure. I think they're 5 watts, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not hugely familiar on radios, but they're great to have. This final thing I want to share is this, which is this is a vintage 70s Sony PSB, which is public service band radio. And the PSB radios have several different settings. They have a squelch. They have usually a few different options. This one only has FM, AM, and PSB on the side. So there's FM radio, AM radio, and then PSB, which is public service band. This allows you to flip to, and it says on there usually where they're at. It has weather. And by the way, most family radios like this have that now. You just push the mode button.
Pressure 30.03 inches and falling. Corvallis, cloudy. Temperature 68. Wind west at 10.
So it has basic weather reports that are put out digitally every day. It's good to have that setting on those radios. But the PSB allows you to listen to not just weather, but also police and fire. So I can switch to, I think it's 156 on here, and it gives me the local dispatch so I can hear what's going on, which might be considered somewhat like a scanner, but I don't have a scanner, but that's another thing you could possibly use. But we're talking about communication beyond the need for scanners, to the point where there might not be any police or fire or even any way to communicate through their standard, methods. And so having a ham radio right here would be the number one. I would definitely recommend this to anyone who wants to be prepared and just feel good about knowing that if something does happen, you can communicate with loved ones. But more importantly, and I hate to say more importantly, because communicating with loved ones is important, but you can't always reach people who are far away. But what you can do is hear what's going on locally. You're going to hear fire responders and police and locals talking about these things on these ham frequencies. And you can just hit the scan button and it'll scan through and find channels where people are talking. And right now, People talk on the internet, they talk on phones, they talk through text. It's just a given. But in an emergency situation, hearing another human voice through a radio could be just a godsend, exactly what we need to know what's really going on. It's something we just can't even imagine happening. You see it in apocalypse movies where people are scanning and they're like, oh my God, wait, we have a signal. But we don't really expect that to ever happen to us. So my idea is just to prepare people. Simple family radios are fine. I actually found this, believe it or not, June 2nd, 2020, when I went to Portland to film the protests, which turned into riots and cops attacking, and everybody ran like crazy. And I found a light on the ground, one of these with one of these giant battery packs, and it was like one of these photography lights, and also that that radio laying in the train tracks, like in the little groove. And I remember at the time thinking, we just take these for granted now. Communication, something that one day we're gonna maybe not have. So anyway, that's my ramble about apocalyptic storage of information and storage of the ability to communicate. I won't go as far as to say put it in a Faraday cage, but when the worst happens, it happens. It is what it is. But it's got longer than I anticipated already, and I know people don't want to hear me ramble about it, so get your damn radios and be prepared for anything. I'll talk to you next time. Peace out. Thanks to all of you for commenting, and if you want to support the channel, visit me on Patreon for extra stuff and shit like that. I'm out.